In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the color value scale or chromatic value scale. Chroma meaning color. So this time we are actually using our acrylic paint. We are using one hue, so whatever color you choose, and you're using white and black. So you'll use white to mix to achieve tints, shades to achieve the black plus the hue to achieve the shades. We're also going to be including a sphere with a cast shadow, and we'll be painting that as well. So I'm going to set that aside and let's go ahead and draw this out. So I would label this color value scale, chromatic in parentheses on the bottom. I'm going to take my ruler and I am going to draw my value scale down at the bottom. I want an 11-inch. Your paper should be 12 inches, 9 by 12, so it will accommodate an 11-inch rectangle down at the bottom to use as your scale. And what I'm going to do while I'm at it is I'm going to mark every inch because I want 11 1-inch sections. As you can see, I have 11 now. I'm going to label this. First of all, I'm going to count and I'm going to find box number 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Box number 6 is going to be my pure hue. Uh-oh. And that just, use my pen, pure hue. And on the left side of that, these are going to be tints. These are our tints, which is white plus my hue. My hue is my color. On the other side of that, these are going to be my darker values. These are my shades, and that is going to be black plus my hue. Okay? So we'll go ahead and draw. Now I'm going to draw my sphere at the top. So my circle basically is going to become my sphere. So I'm just going to draw a circle-like shape. It is about the size of my fist. And our light source is going to be over here. So our light source will be coming in from this side. Remember, because this is a rounded or convex surface, what's going to happen is that our highlight is going to come in about right in here. That's going to be our highlight. And then we're going to have these concentric rings that are going to get darker, values that will get darker as we move away from that highlighted area. These concentric rings will then become these kind of crescent moon shapes as we move away. Now, and this is just kind of a formula. If you have like one light source, it's a good way to kind of practice this value. And then later on you can do it from observation. So here we have the light. These are going to be our lighter values, so light. We have our core shadow, which is going to be in here. Core shadow is actually on the object itself. And then we have our cast shadow, of course, because the object is going to block out light. So we're going to have this cast shadow down here. And so this is our cast shadow. And then we're going to have a little tiny sliver of light value here, and that is going to be our reflected light. Okay. So now that we have that, of course, you are going to need brushes and water and your paint. So you're going to need one hue plus white at this point. So I have chosen blue, and I have my white to mix in. You also need your palette knife. I have my water, and I have a paint bag ready to go. So the first thing that I want to do is, this is my pure hue. So this is my color with nothing mixed in it. So I just want to take my color, my hue, whatever I've chosen, and I'm just going to paint this one box. So before I start, I just want to paint this one. I'm going to clean my brush out really good. Switch it around in the water, clean it out, make sure it's clean. And then I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm going to start mixing my tints. So I have a fairly large kind of glob of white, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very small little dot of blue, or whatever color you want. You can choose the hue that you want, and I'm going to mix it with my entire thing of white here. I'm going to make sure I mix that up really well. It is going to be very, 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 very pale, very light. It'll be a very, very light blue. I'm going to make sure I mix all that together. Mix it together really well. And it's just a very, very pale blue, and you can probably see that. It's just a little hint of blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that first tint and I'm going to paint my first box right here. And that's going to be my lightest value that I have. I'm also going to take that, while I'm at it, I'm going to put a nice little dollop of it here on my highlight. Clean out my brush, and I'm going to continue this process. I'm going to mix, and I want to make sure that my palette knife is cleaned off because I don't want to contaminate my blue. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my color, whatever hue you're using, each time, and I'm going to mix it up. So you can choose, like I said, you can choose whatever hue you want. I chose blue this time. The example that I showed you that was already done was done in red. So I'm with reds. So again, I want to make sure I mix it all up entirely. All right. Using this, I mean, I could put out like 5 little dollops of white, and we could add the blue, more blue each time, and have our different values sitting out. But this just kind of ensures that it's going to get darker each time. So as we're just kind of experimenting and learning about this. So here I have my next value, which is a tint, because this is white plus my hue. And again, I'm going to take it, I'm going to paint on my value scale here, and I'm going to paint around in this first circle. I'm going to paint it around my highlight. I'm going to clean out my brush, and I'm just going to take a wet brush and just kind of mix that, kind of try to blend that in a little more. All right. So now I'm going to go on and I'm going to mix my next one, my next tint. So again, I'm going to wipe off my palette knife. I pick up a little dollop of my blue or my hue, whatever, again, whatever color you're using. And then I'm going to paint that on my next one. And notice that's slightly darker. And I'm going to again pick that up, and I'm going to paint around clean out my brush. And again, you can kind of see the pattern, probably picked up on it by now. So we just take, again, clean off my palette knife, pick up a little more of my hue, mix it in with this, and again, it gets darker each time. And there we go. So I'm going to paint my next box. And I'm going to paint my next. If I paint this rather thickly, then what's going to happen is that it's not going to dry as quick, because acrylic paint dries very quickly. So if I put kind of a lot of paint on that, what's going to happen is I'm going to be able to blend it in. It's not going to dry out by the time I get to the next value. So what I'll be able to do is take, again, I'm just taking a wet brush. I'm not putting any paint on it. Just taking a wet brush and mixing that together, kind of blend it, basically, is what you're doing. You're just blending it. All right, so my last tint, I'm going to pick up some blue, pick up my hue. Sorry, I keep saying blue, but that's what I'm using. But whatever hue you're using, yellow, red, blue, maybe you can always mix up like a secondary color if you wanted to use green or violet or orange. You would just have to mix a bunch of it prior to doing this. Oops. Okay. Notice that this one compared to this, I still have a lot of value range in between those two. So if you wanted to mix this one a little darker, you could. Mix a little more of your hue with it. But you see how it's gradually getting darker, but it's still not close to my pure hue, but that's okay. So I'm going to take my tint here, my last one, and I'm going to paint that in. That off. I got a nice clean brush. It's damp, so I'm just going to come in and I'm going to use that wet brush to just blend in those two values. Okay. Now I'm going to pick up some of my hue. And even though I'm going to be able to blend that together, so I'll get some, notice it's a big contrast, it's really dark, but I'm going to be able to blend that together. So, and I could have mixed this one a little darker if I wanted to. So I'm just going to come with this brush and clean it out maybe a couple times and just kind of work and blend that. Oops, got a little out of my circle there. Okay. Now I'm going to start mixing my shades. So this is where you're mixing black and your hue. So I'm going to switch palettes, and here I have my blue that I'm using, my hue, and I have some black. So this time, I already made a mess. How about that? Pretty good at that. I'm really good at getting paint all over everywhere. Okay, so clean my brush. Let me clean off my palette knife. And there we go. So now I'm going to do kind of the opposite in a way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my black, and I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to mix up a little bit with my blue. So this time I'm mixing my black into my hue. Now, if you're using a lighter value such as, or lighter hue like yellow, you need to be very careful with that, because it's going to take very, very, very little for that yellow to turn on you. So with this, I don't see much of a change, so I'm going to grab just a little more black and add it to my hue. Get a little more. I don't want to get too carried away because that black will start to change it very quickly. Now, also too, remember that your paint will change as it dries. It will get a little bit darker. So I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to drop some on my paper. And then I'm going to paint this one. And yes, it is a little slightly darker than this one. So I'm going to use that as well to work into my sphere. And again, I'm just going to apply kind of a thick layer so that I can blend those together. And again, I'm going to take my wet brush and I'm just going to go over, kind of smooth together those two values. So I'm going to take more of my black and I'm going to put it into my hue. More of my black. So I just add a little bit each time, and remember, it's easier to add more than it is to go, oh, I got it too dark, and try to, you know, make it add more of your hue and go, oh no, wait, that was too dark, let me go back. So you can always add it. If you just add a little bit at a time, it will gradually get darker. And this is definitely darker. You can see a huge change here. And so I come in and I work in this shade right here. I'm going to work that into my previous value on my sphere. And again, I can take a wet brush and I can just kind of help to smooth those together. Now I'm also going to remember that my cast shadow will get darker as it goes towards my object. So I'm going to start painting using this shade. I'm going to start painting right here. I'm going to put this one at the end of my cast shadow. You just have to excuse my little drop of paint there that I accidentally dropped on the paper. So here we go. So I'm just going to work my way this way with my cast shadow. Remember, it gets darker as it moves toward the object. Okay. So I'm going to take and I'm going to mix even more of my black with my hue. I'm going to mix that all together. Now, one of the things that I can do is if I mix it up and I paint it on there and I decide it's not what I want, I can wait for just a short moment and let that dry, and then I can mix a little more and I can paint over it. That's the beauty and the curse of acrylic paint, is that it dries very, very quickly. So again, I'm just going to work this in here. And I'm also going to, again, add it to my cast shadow. It will get gradually darker. clean out my brush, add more of my black to my hue. Make sure that's all mixed together really well. Pick up my hue there. And I work this in again and work it into my sphere. And this is probably the last one I'm going to put on my sphere. And if you're like me, you're going to have little spots everywhere because I've got it on my fingers and I'm touching it and I'm spreading it everywhere. So I'm going to put this darker value in here. And then I'm going to take, I used all my black, so I'm going to get a little more black out on my palette. A little more black. And I'm going to mix it with my hue to make my last and final shade. So mix that up. All starting to look the same. I'm going to add a little more black to that. Okay, and here's my last and final shade. This is extremely dark, but it still has a bit of bluish tint to it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use this dark value to not only finish off my cast shadow, but also to come up underneath my object a little bit. Okay, so clean out my brush. Don't want to leave the acrylic in your brush, it'll ruin your brush, remember that, so make sure your brush is cleaned out. Okay, and oh, I know what we're forgetting. My reflected light. So I'm going to go back to, because I still have this, I still have my my tint here. And even though it's not a lighter one, it's still going to be enough of a difference, enough of a contrast that I'm still going to be able to get this reflected light. So I'm going to turn it just a little bit. And I'm just going to come in here and just very lightly bring that in. And I got it a little too much right here, so I'm just gonna bring this darker value in here and just kind of work that in. There we go. Okay. So now I have that little bit of reflected light, and not only does it kind of give it just it just really kind of makes it pop, but it also gives it a little separation between the cast shadow and the actual object itself. Okay, so here we have that one. Here's the one in red, and another one that I previously did in blue that you can see that's dry now. So remember that you want to wait until it's dry to take your photo to submit it And that is your chromatic value scale and sphere.